Hey y'all, welcome to the Blueprint Roundtable. I'm your host, Lizzie Castro, and I am joined here today with Krissy Manzano and Emily Bell. And today's topic is how do you prepare for your first sales role? Emily, do you want to kick us off?
Ooh, yes. So prior to joining Blueprint, have about probably 12, almost 13 years of individual contributor sales experience, majority of which was outside sales and orientation. And lived a few different past lives and had to kind of align myself to various products and categories and industries. And what I always say, there are like basically three main things to live by, which is know thy product, know thy competitors, and know thy market. And if you know those three things, you can master almost anything that you're selling. And it's not quite that simple, but those are really the main three topics that I focus on when I come into a new role. And there's various ways you can go about doing that. When you're looking to know your product, you obviously want to get with peers within your group. I intentionally always met with the top performers. I wanted to understand, like, what are the reasons why we're winning? What are the reasons why we're losing? Where are the gaps in our product? What's in the roadmap? The second piece is I'd take that knowledge and then I'd go directly to the product people for two reasons. One, I want to start building those relationships internally. But I also want to understand strategically, where these things are prioritized, particularly while we're losing. I think in a lot of cases, that's way more important than why you're winning when you're coming in new to a role. Um, and then the other piece would be, know thy competitors. And that kind of ties into I learned the product first, and then I learned the competitors because I want to understand, organically how to get out in front of some of the reasons why people end up leaving to where it feels more natural in a discovery conversation. And I'd rather know as much as I can going into those first calls versus like learning it through live action. And what I also do is kind of build my own kind of competitive balance sheet. A lot of companies will have something that's already in existence, but if it's not, it's a great way to have some professional development, even on the front end of your tenure at a company. And then the other piece is know thy market. I think industry is can sometimes feel like it's so vast. Like, how am I ever going to learn everything about this industry? And it's like you don't need to learn everything about industry. You need to learn where your product fits into that market. Where you can learn some things high level to talk the talk, but really you just want to understand what problems is your solution solving in the market, which could be very complex, could be very straightforward, but either way, you really need to master that and understand that intrinsically outside of any call scripts. And I think, high level, those three things have served me very well to have repeatable success. But yeah, Krissy, I know you've had success in field sales as well and some past roles. So curious kind of what your methodology looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the points you highlighted are great. I would just piggyback those. I think maybe from a different angle, if it's your first field sales role or sales role in general, I think so I would want to understand what the company wants for the first 90 days. Like, what does success look like, right? Like, outside of like, I have a quota. Do I have a ramp? What are the first 30, 60, 90 days supposed to look like? But I would also create your own 30, 60, 90, right? Like, hey, the first month,
Yeah.
here is my goal. Like, when you get into sales, all roles should have this, just to be honest with you. But like, you've got to focus on outcomes. What do you expect the first 30 days to look like successfully, right? Probably not closing a deal unless it's, really transactional, or it depends what industry you're in. But that's like a learning period, like shadowing people, looking, understanding the product and the market and the and good questions to ask, and, you know, pains and all that. But I think if it's your first time, really in that beginning phase, you're learning a lot. And so I think reminding yourself to be an active listener and just ask a lot of questions. Like, the most successful and valuable people are going to be ones that are good at discovering and qualifying to know where to spend their time, right?
Yeah.
To your point, Emily, like, it's a big industry, big market that regardless of what you're in, I mean, they're all different sizes, but if you try to become an expert in those things, and you can end up focusing on just like pitching people versus trying to understand, do they have pain points that, align with what my product solves? And I think it's easy to go in companies and hear how wonderful the product is and why it's the best in the world. But the reality is, it has gaps, and what it solves is not necessarily going to be what your customers feel it solves, right? So I think understanding what your success is going to look like, and what that takes, and then also, being ready to, ask questions more, just to discover, because that's the fastest way to learn and get up to speed. Just getting on the phone, talking to potential customers, and just again asking a lot of questions. I remember when I was a director at an organization, I never did a demo, obviously. Just I had a team, and I was always able to come in and help my team on calls because all I did was ask questions. So I didn't they were way more of an expert on the product and the industry than I was. Like, you could almost say embarrassingly, but my role in this moment was like I always knew how to get them where I needed to be, right? Because I just asked questions. Like, well, I need the product to do X. And the response is, well, why? Is that a must have or is that a nice to have? Like, so I just highlight that because those are universal things that will help you, whether you're in field sales, regular sales, first role, tenured role. And then I think be organized, like use a CRM. It is your friend. Whether you believe it or not, this whole like rogue, I don't need that, I'm too good, doesn't really work out for people long term. Or it might have. That's not really how that is today. And then, know like, hey, what are great days to do, reaching out to people for prospecting and cold calling and, all those things. Even if you have a BDR team, you should never depend on that team to supply your funnel fully. You should always be prospecting, and it's also just a great way to learn and make sure that you cover yourself. So, I mean, from a field sales perspective, I would just be efficient with your time. Like, if you're going to go out in the field to visit a client, make sure you're going to go visit 3 to 4 more potentially, right? Like, because every time, my biggest lesson with traveling is like, when you travel, like, you lose a lot of time. Even if you're trying to close like a bigger deal, make sure that you're, making up for it, because sometimes too much travel can hurt you, even if that's what's needed, to close relationships. So just being organized, I think, is really key. But hopefully that was helpful. But that's kind of my thoughts on that. So, Lizzie, anything you'd close with or add, or Emily, anything you'd add with?
No, I'd agree with all of that. All of the above.
Yeah, I think this was great. A lot of insight. Thank you both. And that's all for today.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.